WWE Raw took place in Houston, Texas on Monday, and it was headlined by the long-awaited sort of promo battle, I guess you could say, between Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman. Given everything that happened at WrestleMania 41, it was going to be something where eventually you had to have these two sort of air their thoughts on how things unfolded and all of that, since really with Reigns, we saw him at the Raw after WrestleMania, but beyond that, of course, he came back last week to finally make his return and likely set up something for SummerSlam. We'll talk about it, but before we jump in, a quick thank you if you're listening to this on the audio feed. Thanks for subscribing, and also if you're listening to this on the channel as part of the members, the Tribal Chiefs, which we'll talk about that here in just a second too. But if you're a member of the Tribal Chiefs, you're getting this audio version free with your membership on the channel. And again, that's just a membership that gets you some bonus content and gives you some free audio and video like this one. So we're going to try to do these pretty regularly for members because I don't always get to do these live and such. But for the ones I don't, we'll probably throw this up for members both in audio and video versions. And then you'll get the regular videos on the channel as usual. But let's talk about the biggest highlights from Raw. As always, we are not going to go match for match, segment for segment. We will talk about what I think were the biggest things coming out of the show. And we do start with Reigns and Heyman, because as I said, this was something you were going to have to get to at some point. And I think it was kind of fitting that Heyman wanted to come out and finally talk about some stuff, right? But then Reigns interrupts him, and you get the whole kind of scenario where Heyman's trying to lure Reigns back to his side and get him to fill that void that's been left by Seth Rollins, which, by the way, Tuesday's video on the channel will be centered around Seth Rollins. So there's your kind of tip on that, that you will be getting another Seth Rollins video with some more, I think, interesting thoughts on where things stand with Rollins. But this was something where you knew Reigns wasn't going to fall for the BS from Paul Heyman. And so kind of Reigns talking about, and look, I thought this was important. He had to sort of give you the backstory here, right? He had to sort of go into everything that led to that point of where, Heyman once again turns on a client, which we've seen time and time again. And so you kind of look at the way that's unfolded. I mean, again, Heyman's done it how many times in the past, right? Whether it was Brock Lesnar back in the day, whether it's Roman Reigns or anyone else, Heyman, this is what he does. And so Reigns brought up, how it wasn't Heyman that was the person who led to the success of the bloodline. Yes, he was the wise man then, but he's the dumbass now. And so Reigns kind of, again, making sure to push the idea that the bloodline was a product of Roman Reigns and a product of the family. It was not a product of Paul Heyman. So I thought it was good to kind of approach it that way, sort of really focusing on the idea that Heyman, yes, at any opportunity will take credit for anything, but all of this really came back to what Reigns was able to achieve with the help of the Usos, who we mentioned, Solo Sikoa, who we mentioned, and of course Sami Zayn as well. So again, this was, I thought, set up pretty well. And you also got the long-awaited showdown here where, and by the way, if you can hear the dogs barking in the background, it's kind of fitting here that they're doing it during this segment, right? Because this was all about Bron Breakker and Roman Reigns going face-to-face here, which we talked about. Could that be a match that plays out at SummerSlam? We're going to get to that in a second. But, you had Breakker kind of stepping up, making it clear that he thinks that Reigns was in his prime 5 years ago, but the future is now, and of course Breakker is positioned as the future here, along with Bronson Reed. And so you got to your eventual payoff here, which we knew when it was Reigns coming out by himself with Heyman, Breakker, and Reed on the other side. You knew the payoff was going to have to be Jey Uso getting involved here. And that's what happened. Jey comes out, makes the save. You get the double spears on Breakker and Reed. I thought that was a nice touch. And so for all the questions we've had about where are they going to go next, clearly I think they are setting up the obvious direction, right? And that is going to be the tag team match, where it's going to be Roman Reigns and Jey Uso facing Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed at SummerSlam. I'd mentioned, I'd love to see that Reigns versus Breakker match, but it does seem like this is for now something they can use, and then eventually, there is time down the road to do that Reigns Breakker match at some point. Will it ever happen? I don't know, but the way they set it up here, you've got to feel like that is at least something they're kind of teasing that could happen in the future. But it does seem like for now, without them officially announcing it yet as I'm recording this, it does seem like we're going to get the tag team match with Reigns and Jey against Breakker and Reed, which I have no problem with because I think that becomes a pretty interesting match for multiple reasons, right? For starters, who wins? Because it is one where Reigns makes his comeback. You would think the super team of Reigns and Jay has to get a win here, and you kind of give the heels their comeuppance after everything they've done for all these months since WrestleMania. And so that's probably the initial thought there. But you could also, tie it into like, hey, there could be nothing bigger for Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed as part of this dominant heel faction that even though without its leader on screen right now, that would be about as big as it gets for them to score a win like that. So there's lots of ways you can go. We'll talk about it in our SummerSlam predictions coming up next week. But I thought this was a good segment. I thought it really allowed Reigns to kind of dive into, as I said, the backstory and really go into everything that I think you want to cover, which you couldn't really cover for multiple months here since the big turn. It feels like this was the kind of promo where if you had Reigns every single week, well, you would have cut this promo, the week after WrestleMania or something like that. But instead, we took 3 months to get there, all based on, the fact that, like I've mentioned many times now, the schedule for Reigns seems pretty clear. He's going to come back, do one of these PLE cycles for the big one, and then after this, you would expect him back at Survivor Series, and then, maybe the Royal Rumble, and then you probably would expect him for WrestleMania 42 next year, and that's probably, what his schedule looks like for the next however many months that is, right? Next 8-9 months. So that's what you're going to get from Reigns. It's just a matter of figuring out who are the matches going to be, and it looks like this tag team match is going to be one of them. What could it be at Survivor Series? Will you get, him once again in a War Games type setting? And then, maybe he's in the Rumble again. And then does he face someone like Seth Rollins, or could he face Breakker potentially next year at WrestleMania? There's lots of options you can work with there. But it also, I think, achieves something important here in that it keeps Jay kind of in that upper tier, right? You don't want Jay to just get lost in the shuffle after losing the championship. I've mentioned the possibility of Jay getting involved with all the, the MFT bloodline saga on SmackDown, but I don't know if that's going to be anything soon that's going to happen. You're going to probably let that play out a little bit further maybe, and so it's going to have to come after this. And so maybe whatever the fallout is from Solo and Jacob Fatu, that's where something where, if Jimmy, who has been involved in that, do you get Jay back in the mix? Do the Usos team back up? There's lots of ways you can go with it, but I like keeping Jay kind of still in that top tier because it is a bit of a step down when you lose the championship, but he's still so popular. And I know he's not everyone's favorite in the ring, but still, Jay just is so over. And I think this sort of super team of Roman and Jay at SummerSlam sets up a pretty big match against Breakker and Reed. But as I said, I'll have more thoughts on Seth Rollins' role in this whole thing coming up in a video on the channel on Tuesday. All right, beyond that, if we look at some of the other biggest stuff, we can actually start with what was the main event, and that was Io Sky against Stephanie Vaquer, who were, once again, no surprise, these two were having a great match. Didn't get a finish because it was Piper Niven, Alba Fire, and then Chelsea Green, who interfere in this one to cause the DQ. That leads to Naomi coming out, and she, takes out Sky and Vaquer, and so then you've kind of got the setup where Rhea Ripley has to make the save, and, seems like that's, could be kind of an obvious direction to do a multi-woman tag with different, people involved there. But we know, the direction is Rhea, Io, and Naomi in the triple threat match at SummerSlam. But, Vaquer next in line at Clash in Paris coming up, in a little over a month now. So the fact that they did the Vaquer Io Sky match here probably makes you think that Io Sky is not walking out with the championship at SummerSlam, but you didn't have a finish, and I'm not surprised at that. You probably don't want to beat either one of these women right now, just based on kind of where they're at. And so, yeah, you're getting everybody involved here, lots of numbers, because, again, you've got a lot of people who are kind of involved in this story. But, yeah, Naomi kind of playing up sort of the shit stirrer here of this whole group, and she continues to do that very well as the new Women's World Heavyweight Champion. But, like I said, if you didn't watch this match, watch it. The finish may hurt it for some people, but these two are just great together, and, it just kind of shows you where the women's division is at right now in WWE. We saw that at Evolution. I said my favorite WWE PLE of the year so far. I don't even think there's a close second. I know Elimination Chamber was great, but I just thought from top to bottom, Evolution was tremendous, and this main event kind of proved it once again that these two are two of the best out there, and we'll see how it all plays out. in that triple threat match at SummerSlam to decide the World Heavyweight Championship match on the women's side at Clash in Paris. All right, so beyond that, speaking of the women's division, we'll stay there for a second. You had the big sort of face-to-face again with Becky Lynch and Lyra Valkyria. Stipulations added into the mix where Becky doesn't want Lyra Valkyria to be able to challenge for the title again if she loses, and Valkyria accepts that, but under the condition that it's a no count-out, no DQ match. There must be a winner for the Women's Intercontinental Championship at SummerSlam. So, adding the stipulations here, we've seen that a lot in some of these matches, right? You've got the steel cage with Solo and Fatu. You've got the street fight with Cody and Cena. You've got Becky and Valkyria having a stipulation added. And why, right? Because these are all rematches. Those are matches we've seen before, and so you have to do something a little bit different. And I like the fact that you're going to basically, I guess it's kind of a street fight too, right? No count out, no DQ. There must be a winner. Sounds like a street fight. So do the same thing with these two. We've already seen kind of the chemistry they've had, which is, really good. We know that. And so I think you're certainly looking at a situation here where you fully expect the match to be great, and they are playing up the idea that this is kind of the final go here, the final battle for Becky and Lyra, and it's just a matter of who's going to walk out with the championship. We'll make our predictions in our SummerSlam video next week. But that also led into Bayley and Lyra being in the tag team championship match against Raquel and Roxanne, and the champions retain. Shouldn't be a surprise there. I did like them sort of playing up how Lyra was sort of like, what the hell is Bayley doing, making them be in a tag team championship match? And Bayley's just kind of playing the smartass, where she's like, all right, yeah, we just didn't get a chance at WrestleMania, so let's go do it now. And so, kind of playing that up. I kind of like the backstage thing they did with those two. But, of course, you had lots of shenanigans in the finish of this match where it's Dominic getting knocked off the apron. The medical official comes to check on him, and it's medical official AJ Styles, who we'll get to in just a moment. But, yeah, I think sort of Becky interfering, no surprise there. And so Becky pulling Lyra off, Bayley going to try to make the tag, but of course Lyra's not there, so that's going to probably add a little bit more tension too, even though Becky was the one that kind of caused that. Then Raquel hitting the Tejana Bomb on Bayley to retain the titles. The right call, because as you guys know, I'll go ahead and spoil a prediction. I just think for Raquel and Roxanne, great championship match, but at SummerSlam, I think they got to lose to Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss, but I'll give you my reasoning on that in the SummerSlam prediction video. So, yeah, lots of moving parts here in the women's division, and that's why I like it, because, just look at this show here, and it's a great example of kind of the depth that you have on this roster right now. These women are in meaningful sort of programs that, can headline the card, and we've kind of seen that there. So, yeah, I kind of like the way this played out with those matches there also. So, all right. I mentioned AJ Styles. Let's just quickly touch on that. With Dominic Mysterio, the Intercontinental Championship match is official for SummerSlam, as Dominic has been cleared. Everyone rejoice. Dominic can actually compete in a match, as he is going to defend the championship against AJ Styles. Dominic took advantage of the whole evaluation by the WWE medical team member, and so hits AJ Styles from behind. And so says he's cleared and he's ready to face Styles at SummerSlam. So we're going to get the match, which is a shame to me because I could have seen AJ Styles playing a janitor, a valet, a medical team member for months and months, the way this guy's been doing this. But that's okay. We'll actually see him in the ring, which he's pretty good at that too, at SummerSlam, taking on Dominic. Should be a really good match between those two, but we all knew it was headed in this direction. But I like the way they kind of used this to be able to kind of put AJ in all these sort of comedic roles a little bit. And all that. So, yeah, we knew this match was going to happen. Just a matter of when they were going to kind of finally make it official, and they did. So, it's set, and, yeah, kind of a noteworthy couple days for AJ Styles, isn't it? Made his TNA return at Slammiversary, and now gets his Intercontinental Championship match for SummerSlam. All right, got the rematch between Rusev and Sheamus. That went down as, once again, it was kind of just a hard-hitting match, but Rusev taking the Broad Kick. Sheamus gets the win. And so, speaking of things I could just see over and over again, these two beating the hell out of each other. Yeah, these two could literally fight forever, as the saying goes. But, yeah, got just another hard-hitting match, and no surprise that these two always do a great job with that. And we will now touch on well, really wasn't a lot on the show, but it did, kind of open things up, and that was the exchange between CM Punk and Gunther. And you knew the phrase best in the world had to come in somewhere because CM Punk calls himself the best in the world. Gunther, by many people's, standards, might be the best in the world. He, of course, thinks that of himself. And so playing up the idea, that is kind of what we're talking about here. It's the best in the world versus, well, the best in the world, right? And so I think it's kind of good to go that direction. Gunther sort of saying that Punk is never going to be the best in the world, but at least he has the degenerates chanting for him. So that is kind of what you're playing up here. It really is the idea that Punk can sort of call himself this, but Gunther has proven this time and time again. And that's kind of what, Gunther is talking about with the egos and everything, right? He feels like his is justified because of what he's done, and it's based on the results. It's not based on what the fans think and those kind of things. So, yeah, I mean, this is one too, just given the schedule. It would have been great to maybe have a longer build to get to this match, but that at least gives you an opportunity to do this, at least one more time between these two next week on Raw. And so that's really all you can ask for, giving these two a microphone next week and whenever else you can do it before you get to that show. I think that's probably what you're going to get here. And I will talk about this match too, coming up in another video, as you will see. So, not a lot, but good opening segment, I thought, with these two. And elsewhere on the show, just quickly on a couple other things, we did get new number one contenders for the Tag Team Championships on the Raw side, the World Tag Team Championships, as it was kind of the surprise winners with the LWO getting the win over New Day and the Creed Brothers in the number one contenders triple threat tag team match. So they're going to face Finn Balor and JD McDonough at some point. I would assume that's going to happen next week, maybe longer than that. But, I think that is clearly the direction they're headed in. Then you kind of had the New Day sort of watching AJ Styles do his janitorial work in the back. But at the same time, also kind of just fretting about everything going on in this tag team division. Grayson Waller comes up. A-Town Down Under is no more. So he says Austin Theory's injured. And so now you've kind of got what seemingly is going to be Waller playing the role of Big G here, being kind of the third wheel maybe in the New Day. And we'll see what that leads to. They've been teasing that for a while with sort of those backstage segments where they've kind of been in the background and all this other stuff. But, that's kind of the story there, it seems. I mean, Sami Zayn, Karrion Kross, I guess we can add a quick note on that. I think this is one that's interesting, because Kross gets the win. So you would think that this has to go to a third match. Will they do that at SummerSlam to give, Sami and Karrion Kross that match on the card? You've already had two now. Of course, at Night of Champions, Sami won. Now Karrion Kross gets the win via using the steel pipe. And so I would think that if you're looking to add another match, and like we said, it's not surprising here adding all these matches because it is one where you've got to fill these two nights. So without, again, as I'm recording this, I've not looked to see if there's been any announcements or anything like that, but I would think this would make sense to add this to a SummerSlam card potentially, or maybe they do, the rubber match at some point in the near future. But this would seem like one where what else are these guys going to do at SummerSlam? It's been a big year for Sami. He's setting up for a big year next year. I'm still of the belief that he's the front runner to win the 2026 Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia. It's obviously been a big year for Karrion Kross in terms of fan support. So you would think you want these two on the show, and really the one-on-one kind of third match, which probably would have a stipulation, I would think, too, as well. That's the thing. Like, you've got several potential rematches on this card, but I think by adding some of these stipulations, it makes them feel a little bit fresh. They're not sort of immediate rematches. You've kind of had a little bit of time in between them. So, yeah, that is just kind of something that, with just based on how the schedule works, it's just the way it falls. And so, I don't know if that's going to be everyone's favorite thing, but we'll see if they were to get to the third match here between those two. And as Zayn said, Kross has been the person who's kind of kept him from his goals, and that goal is still to win the World Championship for the first time. Could have been in the gauntlet match last week, didn't happen. He wants to finish things. That was the whole goal here. Well, not finished yet, so they've got to continue this, and like I said, my guess is that could come at SummerSlam. So, all right, there you go. That was everything. Other than that, like I said, I thought a pretty good Raw. Anytime you have Roman Reigns on the show, it's going to feel bigger. You set up the, kind of exchange between Punk and Gunther. The women's division, I think, is just riding high right now with lots of good stuff. And, yeah, I mean, like I said, I think everything else kind of served its purpose on this show. And, it is just sort of a thing where you have a lot to get in before you get to SummerSlam, just based on such sort of a short turnaround time where you went from Night of Champions to Saturday night's main event, now to SummerSlam. And of course, for the women, you had the Evolution show in there and all of that. So, yeah, there's just a lot happening on this current, part of the calendar for WWE. But having Roman Reigns back in the mix, always a good thing. And like I said, setting up what seems to be a pretty big tag team match at SummerSlam. But as always, guys, I appreciate you listening and watching, of course, when I do the videos here on either the YouTube channel or on the podcast feed, wherever you are consuming this. But of course, if you are consuming it on one and not the other, you can go find the other. You can check out the YouTube channel, almost to 14,000 subscribers now. You can join the Tribal Chiefs, as I said. That is a membership tier that is basically just you donating to the channel, letting me do more bonus content in addition to the regular videos I do each week. So that's what this is. And also on the podcast feed, like I mentioned, I do some exclusive stuff audio-wise on the podcast feed that you won't find on the YouTube channel. So search for Wrestling Reaction, any podcast app you use. And if you want to connect with me, you can do that on Twitter /X @WrestleBlake. You guys hit me up. Let me know what you think about this week's edition of Raw. And again, appreciate you watching and listening as always. And let me know your thoughts on this week's edition of WWE Raw.